Welcome to Section 0, Object, Scope, and Definitions. It is your responsibility to understand and apply all requirements of the Canadian Electrical Code Part 1, including those not addressed in the training. Do you want to know how to
Hi, I am Arthur, your subject matter professional. I will help you to understand and be able to apply the requirements of the section of the Canadian Electrical Code Part 1.
The aim of this training is to provide new knowledge and to support the development of new skills that you can apply immediately to your job. The purpose is why you are taking this learning. To directly support the purpose, this learning has identified objectives. Here is what you will learn as you take this training. This training is divided into topics. These topics build on each other, so a best practice is to review them in the order they are presented. Save or print a copy of the Quick Reference Guide. It is located in Resources. Use this quick reference guide to take notes and as a practical job aid for this code section.
Canadian electrical product standards cover everything from toasters to high-voltage switchgear, from conductors to generators, and everything in between. Collectively, these standards are known as the Canadian Electrical Code Part 2. On the other side of the coin, the Canadian Electrical Code Part 1, Safety Standard for Electrical Installations, is a single code that covers the installation of wiring systems and equipment. Together, Part 1 and Part 2 series of standards lay down an integrated set of requirements that form the backbone of the Canadian Electrical Code. A simple way of looking at the differences between Part 1 and Part 2 of the code is that Part 1 applies to installations on private property, while Part 2 covers installations on public property. Part 3 of the Canadian Electrical Code covers overhead and underground lines and equipment used by electrical supply and communication utilities located outdoors, sections of building used for that purpose, or fenced supply stations. Part 4 of the Canadian Electrical Code specifies objectives to provide for the safety of persons, livestock, and property against dangers and damage that can arise from the use of electrical installations, and to provide for the proper functioning of those installations at all voltages within industrial facilities. In addition, this code sets objectives for the protection of property against damage, if the damage can lead to unsafe events or conditions for persons and livestock. This code specifies safety objectives for the following criteria: design, selection of electrical equipment, erection and verification, and operation and maintenance. Part 5 of the Canadian Electrical Code, which covered electrical installations in mines and quarries, was moved to CSA Standard M421, Use of Electricity in Mines. Electrical installations in mines and quarries are intended to move with the operation and are not fixed in position like installations in Part 1. Part 6 of the Canadian Electrical Code is the Electrical Inspection Code for existing residential occupancies. This part of the Canadian Electrical Code specifies requirements for the evaluation of existing electrical installations and equipment with respect to electrical fire and shock hazards due to overheating, abuse, deterioration, or quality of work in residential occupancies and factory-built relocatable and non-relocatable structures used as dwelling units. Codes and standards provide general requirements and directions on how it is to be built and used. What conditions can it be used in? Where can it be used? Who can use it? When maintenance and servicing are required? And how it is to be installed. Most standards are designed to ensure interoperability. In other words, different components of a system will work with each other in the manner intended. For example, it would be inconvenient to purchase a lawn sprinkler that would not connect to your garden hose because the connector threads were different. However, when it comes to electrical systems, interoperability is not just a matter of convenience, it is a matter of safety. Codes and standards become mandatory for electrical installations by regulation. Regulations are proclaimed by the elected government after consulting with the public and affected industry, but without debate in the legislature. They are part of an act, but much more specific in nature, but still outline principles, duties, responsibilities, and powers. The organization, office, or individual responsible for approving equipment, materials, an installation, or a procedure. The phrase, authority having jurisdiction, is used in a broad manner, since jurisdictions and approval agencies vary, as do their responsibilities. The AHJ may be a federal, provincial, local, or regional department, or an individual such as a fire chief, a fire marshal, the chief of a fire prevention bureau, labor department, or health department, a building official, an electrical inspector, or others having statutory authority. The Canadian Electrical Code becomes applicable when it is adopted by the Regulatory Authority Having Jurisdiction, AHJ. When AHJs adopt the Canadian Electrical Code, the AHJ sometimes adds a separate amendment document specific to the particular AHJ. This specific addition becomes effective when AHJ adopts it. Mandatory rules identify requirements that are mandatory or prohibited. When the terms shall or shall not are used, this indicates that rule is mandatory. Permissive rules are requirements that are allowed but not mandatory or prohibited. The terms shall be permitted or shall not be required are used to indicate a rule is permissive. This introduction section contains a lot of useful information about the structure of the code. First, the code only uses even numbers, except in Section 38, when numbering the rules. The reason for this is to have the ability to add new rules during updates. Rules are numbered in the following way. Starting with rules, each starts with the code section, then the rule number, 12-100 for example. Then subrules are marked with 1, and the A, I, and A are described as items. For example, when referencing the outlined rule. Write it out as shown. In the preface is a table with metric units. It lists the symbol used to represent each, its name, the conversion to the previously used unit, as well as the previously used unit. The object of the Canadian Electrical Code is to establish safety standards for the installation and maintenance of electrical equipment. In its preparation, consideration has been given to the prevention of fire and shock hazards, as well as proper maintenance and operation. In order to prevent fire hazards, use the following rules. Use overcurrent protection related to short circuits and overloads. Maintain appropriate clearances from combustible materials. And prevent the ignition of hazardous and combustible materials. Compliance with the requirements of this code and proper maintenance will ensure an essentially safe installation. Prevent shock hazards by addressing the following. Using sound grounding and bonding practices. Selecting the appropriate conductor insulation. Ensuring the appropriate operation of installations and equipment through proper installation methods, the use of equipment and devices that meet the condition of use and application, the use of equipment that has the appropriate certifications and is approved to a Canadian standard. Regular and proper maintenance. Wiring installations that do not make provision for the increasing use of electricity may be overloaded in the future, resulting in a hazardous condition. It is recommended that the initial installation have sufficient wiring capacity and that there be some provision made for wiring changes, which might be required as a result of future load growth. The code is not intended as a design specification or as an instruction manual for untrained persons. The code covers all electrical work and electrical equipment that operates or is intended to operate at all voltages for the following installations: buildings, structures and premises, factory-built relocatable and non-relocatable structures, and self-propelled marine vessels connected to a shore supply of electricity. The requirements of the code do not apply to installations or equipment employed by an electric, communication, or community antenna distribution system utility in the exercise of its function as a utility, as recognized by the regulatory authority having jurisdiction, and located outdoors or in buildings or sections of buildings used for that purpose. Equipment and facilities that are used in the operation of an electric railway and are supplied exclusively from circuits that supply the motive power. Installations or equipment used for railway signaling and railway communication purposes, and located outdoors or in buildings or sections of buildings used exclusively for such installations. Aircraft and electrical systems in ships that are regulated under Transport Canada. Canadian Electrical Code does not make or imply any assurance or guarantee by the authority adopting this code with respect to life expectancy, durability, or operating performance of equipment and materials referenced herein. For the purpose of correct interpretation, certain items have been defined, and where such terms or their derivatives appear throughout this code, they shall be understood to have the following meanings. The ordinary or dictionary meaning of terms shall be used for terms not specifically defined in this code. Section 0 incorporates a number of defined terms whose meaning is likely different in the context of electrical installation than it is in general use. Understanding what a specific term means can play a significant role in the application of specific code rules. For example, take a look at these three terms: residential occupancy, single dwelling, and dwelling unit. A residential occupancy is defined as the occupancy or use of a building or part of a building by persons for whom sleeping accommodation is provided, but who are not harbored or detained to receive medical care or treatment, or are not involuntarily detained. Examples of residential occupancies may include hotel rooms, college dormitories, or a bunkhouse at a summer camp. A single dwelling is defined as a dwelling unit consisting of a house, one unit of row housing, or one unit of a semi-detached, duplex, triplex, or quadruplex home. Examples of single dwellings include traditional single-family homes and townhouse. In most jurisdictions, a single dwelling is characterized by direct access to the outside without having to go through a common area. A dwelling unit is defined as one or more rooms for the use of one or more persons as a housekeeping unit, with cooking, eating, living, and sleeping facilities. A single dwelling is also a dwelling unit. A residential occupancy is not a dwelling unit. However, a dwelling unit could also be deemed a residential occupancy. Examples of dwelling units include apartments and condominium units that form part of a larger building. Why does understanding these different terms matter? Because rules for receptacles and circuits vary based on the type of occupancy the electrical equipment is installed. Rules 26-710, 26-712, and 26-720 apply to all residential occupancies. Rule 722 applies to dwelling units, and Rules 26-724 applies to single dwellings. Therefore, if you didn't understand the application of these rules based on the defined terms, you may needlessly run a dedicated circuit for a balcony receptacle in a dwelling unit of an apartment, when you could have saved time and money supplying the balcony receptacle from the circuit supplying the living room instead. This is just one example of many situations where fully understanding the defined terms in Section 0 can save both time and money on an electrical installation, while still having a safe and code-compliant installation. The definitions of armor and sheath clearly delineate the differences between armored cable and metal sheathed cable. These definitions refer to regulatory provisions regarding flood hazard zones and flood elevations, as reflected in local building or zoning bylaws, or flood-related policies when applicable. Cable tray is used as a supporting means for cables and does not typically enclose the cable. The change aligns with definition for cable tray system in CSA 22.2, number 126.1. This proposed change also aligns with the definition of cable tray in NEC. The defined voltage levels specify AC and DC levels for extra low voltage, and high voltage. The limit for low voltage is 1000 volts AC and 1060 volts DC. The voltage definitions correlate with the definitions in the NEC, IEC, and with the scopes of numerous CSA safety standards for electrical products. Time for an activity. Choose your response and then select Submit.
You covered a lot in this course. This summary helps you to recall the main concepts and requirements of this code section. You have now completed the learning on the main concepts and requirements of this code section. Next, you will take the open book quiz through the link on the course page. Click Close to exit, and then start the quiz.